reporting of individual hostage-taking. This House would ban all reporting on individual hostage-taking. Last time, this House would ban all reporting on individual hostage-taking. We'd now like to begin the debate, so I'd like to welcome the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mrs. Speaker. Now, we believe kidnapping, either of an individual or an individual family, we don't really care about that sort of unit type thing. We think that's a horrible thing to happen, both to the victim and anyone related to that person. We think they don't need to be confronted by images in the media of the people they love taken captured by someone they think are horrible. When they don't know the result of what's going to happen, they don't know the fate of that person, we think that they need to be protected from that. We also think the hostage needs to be protected from the situation when they're reported on, and that's why we want to impose this ban. So first, some definitional issues. Then I'm going to talk about the media and the role of the media and how it's not harmed in this particular instance, and we think it needs to be protected from itself, sort of. And then secondly, I'm going to talk about the hostage and hostage safety. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about the family and the harm this brings to the family of the victim. Now, firstly, definitional issues. We think this deals with specific details about individual cases. So either a family being kidnapped by someone or an individual. If we're talking, for example, about Colombia, we think it's perfectly okay for the media to say in Colombia there are lots of kidnappings by FARC. But it's not okay to give details about one particular victim and the situation in which they got kidnapped and the names of the people in their family and how you can talk to them and where they live and how you can visit them. So that's the kind of details we don't want the media to publish. What media? All media. So newspapers, televisions, blogs, and by what laws? The general laws that we have in place to guard media against publishing things we don't want them to publish. This is not going to be a perfect model of blocking any information coming out, but we think in general there will be enough information blocked out that we can prevent media hypes of the type of the Mehdi-something person in the UK that was just recently somehow kidnapped or murdered or something. Yes?
Will you permit the media to report on a case after a hostage situation has concluded?
We think that in general that it would be okay to publish this as soon as we can deem the safety of the hostage is guaranteed and the situation is cleared out. So once the police has deemed it okay to free the information, it can be freed and published. So yes, that would be okay. Now firstly, the media. We think that basically there's an idea of what the media does, right? It is to inform people about the situation in the world and to guard and provide checks and balances on the institutions of power in our society. So they check on the police on whether they're doing their job well. They check on government on whether they're doing their job well. We think in this particular instance, they don't need individual cases of kidnapping in order to do that part of their job well. They just need aggregate information on whether the police actually solve these cases, how many of these cases happen, what type of safety issues are around. On the other hand, what we see that the media generally does is because there's basically a market for media, they need to sell attention, or they need to get attention to sell their advertisement, and that's how they keep on working. We see that very often they focus on stuff that immediately captures the attention of people, stuff that is sensationalist, stuff that actually is easy to sell emotionally to people, and that's where we get into gory details of crimes. That's where we get into lots of attention to personal stuff that might be harmful in some particular cases. And we think in this particular cases, there are harms which I'm going to get into, well, basically now, which is why we can actually ban this sort of thing. Now, what we see in some cases, for example, that media limits itself in these instances. For example, in the Netherlands, we have a concord in the media to never publish the last name of any suspect of a crime until they're actually convicted. Now, this works because it doesn't actually sell that much extra. They still pay all the attention to all the crimes and the details of the victim, but in this particular case, it works. In the general situation of individual kidnapping, we see that it doesn't work media are paying too much attention to it, so that's why the government needs to step in and actually impose the ban. Now, going on to hostage safety, because we think in general that when you're in a hostage situation, right, someone's taking you hostage, that person needs to have control and needs to have the idea that they're safe in that situation in order to make a deal to actually sell you back to your family or to whoever you want to be brought back to. Now, we think that that's the reason why you see in all the movies the line, "do not inform the police." Or in the books. Now, once you get to the media attention, not informing the police is really sort of out of the question. They'll know about it anyway later on. And we think that that's a dangerous situation. We think that in that particular case, the hostage taker is going to feel insecure. And is going to be much more likely to go to more extreme instances of violence because they don't have control over the situation anymore. They'll be paranoid about who knows what about that case, how much they can protect themselves against publicity and against the police, and how likely it is to be found. We also think that that means they're skeptic about any deal being offered, and that means that the situation is going to prolong, which we think is also going to mean there's more danger to the hostage.
Now, are you suggesting that it would be better for hostage situations to be resolved without the input of police and special forces?
We're not talking about the police here. We think it's perfectly fine if people go to the police. We don't think it's fine that people go to the media or it gets into media attention because we think that's unsafe, because then the hostage taker actually knows that the police knows, which in other cases the hostage taker doesn't know for certain and is probably going to, with enough assurances, is going to accept the case to be true, or at least has to accept to being able to get the money. Now, in the case of media attention, they know the police knows, so they're not going to be accepting any deal. The likelihood of the victim dying is so much larger than in a case of secrecy in the media. Now, we also think there will be damage to a hostage once that person is released. We think that there's going to be a lot of attention again when they're in a fragile situation, and they're going to be offered lots of book contracts at a moment when they really just want to be with their family, which really we think is much more important for them at that particular stage. So then moving on to the family, and why we also need to protect the family and not just the safety of the hostage. We think that that family is going to be in an emotionally fragile state. They're just incredibly scared about the person they care a lot about. And they're going to be willing to do whatever it takes to bring that person back. We really want them to go to the police. But we think that in many cases, they might feel that there's a way to get more information from the media. Although we've just explained how this is going to actually endanger the hostage, they might feel that there's a way for them to get more information from the media. We think the media is actually going to be abusing them when they're sorry, I thought that was the 1 minute ban. When they're actually in a situation that's very fragile. So we think that's very, very particularly dangerous. And all the rest of this argument Simone is going to be explaining. We beg you to propose.
Thank you very much, Speaker. We now invite the Leader of Opposition to the stage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Freedom of the press is a pillar of the liberal society. At first proposition, they would have you believe that a government's decisions about what is utile or is not utile should outweigh press freedom. This is not a principle we can risk establishing, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to talk first about why this sort of reporting is an essential aspect of press freedom, and second about why their claims about utility and about families and about hostage safety will actually fall inside opposition's favor in this round. Magic will talk about the ramifications of globalization and the internet for this policy and why it will actually lead to worse reporting and undesirable press, rather than no press at all, as they would have you believe. Rebuttal will be interwoven. So first, I want to talk about press freedom. Press freedom is essential to the liberal state because it is the first check against state power. Without a free press, citizens have no basis on which to evaluate their governments. Now, Mr. Speaker, a government's handling of security and of hostage situations is unquestionably a very important part of its performance. Citizens must know how well governments handle these situations. A government's handling of a hostage situation shows its hold on sovereignty and its hold on internal security. So to give a few examples, right here in the Philippines, the success or failure of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front in its hostage-taking activities reflects on the success or failure of the Philippine government to provide safety to its citizens. Likewise, when Al-Qaeda in Iraq kidnaps someone and beheads them, that reflects poorly on the Iraqi government. So, Mr. Speaker, the first thing we want to tell you is that voters and citizens ought to have access to information about how their governments are coping with these situations, about the frequency of hostage-taking, about the ongoing process in response to hostage-taking, and so on. We think that this is essential information for a voter who wants to evaluate how well his government is doing or how well her government is doing in providing security and in providing stability and in maintaining sovereignty. And without allowing the press to report on this, on hostage-taking and on the ongoing process, this is not possible. No thank you. But second, Mr. Speaker, let's take a look at the larger precedent this sets for these societies. So, many situations arise where a government's job would be made easier, people would be made safer if we limited press freedom. I want to give you two examples. So first, consider the case of WikiLeaks in the United States government. So a lot of the documents released by WikiLeaks put U.S. citizens and put agents abroad in danger because specific names were named. Now, we asked side proposition, would they be okay with letting the United States government ban the publication of information from these documents just because it put agents in danger? We don't think that's okay. We don't think we can place that sort of limitation on press freedom. Or consider information about who is imprisoned in Guantanamo Bay Detention Center. Right? It would be better for the U.S. national security if the United States kept terrorist organizations in the dark about the United States' knowledge of operations and so on that is directly related to who they've actually captured and who they're interrogating. But we still think reporting on this information is vital because the treatment of these detainees is a huge political issue and something citizens have to know about. Go ahead.
Why do I need the name and the age of someone who's kidnapped in order to know the general safety of an area, which is what you think is the most important?
So actually, I don't know that that's the most important thing, because I think this sort of reporting is a lot more effective if there is a human interest side to it. So first of all, recognize that a specific name, a specific face, just creates a stronger human connection and a stronger awareness of the risk and awareness of what is actually happening. But also recognize that you're placing a serious limitation on the ability of media outlets to report on an ongoing situation, right? Like, they can say there's been a kidnapping in, I don't know, somewhere in the southern Philippines or somewhere in Colombia, and negotiations are ongoing. But if they're actually going to continue to provide more information about the story, they need to be able to talk about the individual details of the case. Now, we think that the amount of attention something gets in the press strongly influences how much influence it has on the political process. So for that reason, we think that, in fact, having a name and having a face is really important. No thank you. So we challenge side proposition to tell us what the meaningful difference between the two examples I gave you and what they propose is. I don't think there is a meaningful difference, and I think that if we win on that issue alone, we win this round, because all they've told you is that what they propose is more efficacious, but I think press freedom is more important than efficacy here. But let's look at efficacy. Let's look at hostage safety. No thank you. So she talks about how this will make hostage takers violent because they'll be paranoid, because they see that the police is aware of what's going on, or like there's stuff in the, like I barely understood this point, right? Like, they know that the police knows and that's dangerous. So I think that there are only going to be a very few cases where the police or some sort of federal investigative bureau is not informed when a hostage taking happens, right, Mr. Speaker? So a family is going to notify the police or notify the authorities even if it's in secret. And it's not like the MILF is wiretapping the family and, making sure that they don't go to the authorities in this case. I just don't think this applies to most of the cases we're talking about here. But tell me why it does.
Well, everyone else in the city will also know about this particular crime, which makes that person much more suspicious of any deal being offered or just doing anything related to the hostage.
So actually that's interesting, because this is another thing I'd like to talk about under this point. So we actually think that on our side of the house, we improve the safety of people who are taken hostage. So first of all, coverage increases the chances of those with information coming forward. We think this is actually pretty obvious, right? Like, if there's an all-points bulletin put out for a missing person with a picture of the person who has been taken hostage, and I know that person was last seen somewhere in my community, this allows me to be on the lookout. Now, if we're not allowed to report a name, if we're not allowed to report a face, then there's no way for me to be on the lookout as a citizen who cares about the security of my community and who wants to help this individual from my community out. So we think that, in fact, on our side of the house, we dramatically increase the chance of rescue. But moreover, under the efficacy of this policy, consider that hostage-taking in the future becomes much more likely on their side of the house. So recognize, Mr. Speaker, hostage-taking is a regional issue. There are much higher risk regions and much lower risk regions. This is because most hostage-taking is ideological or financial. It's not personal. It's a group trying to make a point or trying to acquire money, and groups operate in specific regions. Now, knowledge that I as a person will be in danger from this group if I go to that region is important because it allows me to avoid going to that region and avoid putting myself in danger. So for example, while I'm in the Philippines, I'm probably not going to go to the far south because, as I understand it, there's a pretty serious security risk for someone who looks like me who goes to that part of the Philippines. Mr. Speaker, what we're telling you is that in many cases, our side of the house is better for hostages, and in every case, we need to stand for press freedom. We beg to oppose.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I will now invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition to the podium.
Thank you for the floor, Mr. Speaker. Now, our leader of the opposition stands up here and says, listen, freedom of information is essential in our liberal state to control our government. Now, we agree that freedom of information is important. However, what we say is more important, that the lives of our citizens are worth living. And we say when you've just been kidnapped and reunited with your family for the first time, with 5 million cameras on your face offering you TV interviews at your most vulnerable state in your life ever, we say that damages your life significantly, and we are happy to limit the freedom of press in a very small way to gain the benefits of having these people build a better life afterwards and feeling better. And we say that is what our state is for, and not just to follow certain principles which might lead to horrendous outcomes. Now, what I'm going to do in my speech, I'm going to first of all talk about what specifically is this damage to the victim and the family of the victim when this kidnapping is happening and specifically afterwards. And second of all, I'm going to talk about the danger of copycats and then thirdly, very quickly, about the damage to the actual family of the hostage taker. But first, some rebuttal. Because what does our leader of the opposition do? He says, listen, freedom of the press is essential. Then he talks about the fact that the press can no longer report about general cases of kidnapping, can no longer report how many kidnappings are taking place in a certain area, can no longer report how safe our cities or our countries are. If he would have listened to my fellow debater here, the Prime Minister, he would have noticed that we stated that they can give all this general information, they just cannot give any specific details out of a specific case while it is happening. That means any information that he needs to check our government the way he wants it to is still available on our side of the house, which basically takes out a large part of that objection. We say what is also important, which you should have noted from the speech from our Prime Minister, is that we say it is okay for the police to report on the specifics of the case after the case has wound down, after everything has calmed down, after the victim is safely home with the family and has a bit of time to recover. So if you feel there is a need to investigate the specifics of a police case, that is still possible, only after the fact has happened. Then he says, listen, what is very important here in how we report on these crimes is that bringing a human face to these cases makes it a stronger human connection, and what that does is that people are more informed. About the way our government operates. We say exactly this human connection, exactly this attention feeds this media frenzy, feeds the sale of these media, and what makes that happen is that these people and these families and these victims are harassed throughout this process, which is exactly what we want to stop. Then finally he says, listen, we need to be able to publish information about victims so people can give tips and give information to our police. What we say to that is, we all, I would say, in our countries, have broadcasting sessions where we say, listen, there are missing people, if you see this person somewhere, please call this number. Hardly ever does any of that lead to the media frenzy that happens when you say this person has been taken hostage at this point of time. It does, however, it can lead to information coming out. So again, we say that limit or that damage that we try to establish is very limited on our side. my next point. The damage to the victim and to the family. We say, first of all, the attention that happens during the kidnapping is attention specifically focused on the victim and on the family. Why? Because it's media feeds itself on this emotional attention, this emotional feeling, the distress, the sorrow, the grief, the cries out for help, and that is where they get the publicity, that is where they get the sales. So that's exactly what they want from this family, that is exactly what they want from these people. So what happens is these people are harassed continuously. We say when you're in your most vulnerable state, when your child has just been kidnapped, that is exactly what you do not need to stay calm and to try to survive this issue. Yes, sir.
If media coverage is bad for the families of hostages, why did Gilad Shalit's family use the media so publicly and so often to advocate his cause?
We don't think that families who've had people kidnapped are necessarily the best experts to decide how you should deal with the attention that your family can get. We think maybe you should get the police to inform you on that. We think maybe the police are the experts here who've dealt with multiple hostage situations, so we don't think one example of one family publicising the event of a kidnapping is in any way damaging to our case. Which brings me on to the remainder of this point, right? We said during this kidnap, extremely emotional damage, extremely harassing. We say when this victim is released or freed, we say having this media attention, having these cameras on your face is exactly what you do not need at that time. We say that is a problem at that time. We say it becomes a problem later on when these pictures stay in the media, right? Once published, they don't go offline. Next time a case hits the media, they're going to reminisce about old cases. They're going to republish these issues. They're going to do what happened in our area this year and do a whole, as they do this time of year, and say, what are the sensational things that happened, and repeat these images and repeat these images. Which means that these victims, once freed or released, are confronted with this situation continuously and at the worst possible moments. That also means that when these victims and these families, no thank you, live their lives and try to build up their lives after this has happened, they're continuously informed by people going, oh, weren't you the girl that was kidnapped when she was 12? How was that? Are you okay? Or people not daring to ask, being awkward to you because they know you've been through this. We feel what they need at this point is some distance to recover, and they don't need this attention. Which brings me on to my next point about the danger of copycats and how the media operates, right? Because we say what happens is when a case is reported on after it has wound down, it is a lot less interesting for the media to spend the amount of attention and time on it that it will do when it's reported on while it's happening. Why is that? A number of reasons. First of all, it's not as exciting to report on when you already know the end of the story, right? There's no sense of sort of excitement and of danger and, oh my God, what will happen next? Everybody already knows what the ending is. So if you report on it half a year later, the reporting will be a lot less extensive and a lot less, graphic because of that. Second reason why the media will be a lot less calm after this event has happened is because what they will do is they will give the full story once. There won't be a drag on of weeks and days where every day they try to find a new interesting fact to tell about this story, which means it will be dragged out, put into the media, get into several newspapers, put onto the headlines days and days again, to the point where you can't ignore it anymore. We say what happens half a year later is there's a lot less of this damaging effect, even if they still report gory details. Now we say what happens is when they report these gory details, while it's happening, all this attention, all this media frenzy, we say what happens in our society, if we'd like to admit it or not, there are people in our society, highly distressed, psychologically vulnerable individuals who might be contemplating doing this kind of thing, right? We say when you talk about a situation of taking somebody hostage, we say this isn't just an economically driven thing you do. We think there's many ways in which you can earn money, even as a criminal, which don't involve lying and integrity. And we say what happens is these people are fueled and are given more fantasies about how this violence occurs, how they attack people, and given even detailed organizational plans by the leaders the media portray on how they should kidnap people. We say what this leads to is, in the end, people on the edge, people already distressed, more likely to commit suicide, and this is what we want to prevent. Vote proposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd now like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition to the podium.
Lovely, thank you. I want want to start off with a little bit of rebuttal before I answer our third constructive point, because I think that side proposition ultimately misses a lot of the really nitty-gritty nuanced details of how there can be legitimate security interests in the particular details of the cases. So let's start off with a very brief example. If a Muslim terrorist group is kidnapping exclusively Catholic priests in an attempt to influence the followers of that religion in the province of Iraq, or Christians or Jews or any other sort of instances like that, then I think that the fact that these individuals are Catholic priests or were advancing a particular ideology that was hated or repugnant to this Muslim group is ultimately significant to people's understanding of the broader situation and understanding of the way that these kidnappings fit into this broader societal scheme. So I think that it's very often justified on other socioeconomic characteristics or other relevant personal characteristics to name these individuals and to show just why perhaps these were being kidnapped. So very often, as Sam tells you, these are either based on financial motivations, in which case perhaps it's not as important, but very often also political motivations for either the Chechens in Russia or all sorts of examples in Iraq. Just a wide variety of instances that are very politically motivated and advance particular agendas. And that's important. No, thank you. So I think furthermore that the fact that they kind of skim over the fact that we have individuals maybe coming forward with information and ultimately having the sorts of details in this case makes them much more effective and much more likely to resolve the hostage situation by leading to tips that ultimately have the police result in a capture or arrest of the kidnappers and a safe return of this individual. So if they proclaim that they are so interested in the psychological aspects of this individual, like protecting their right to individual to see themselves as they want, not be oppressed by the media, I think that first of all we need to look at the physical safety of these individuals as our first and foremost concern, because that has to be primary. If they're being harmed by the kidnappers, if they're killed, or they're somehow otherwise there's physical damage to them, that ultimately has to be our primary concern. So again, why do specific details matter? It's a lot easier to go to the police if you know the details as opposed to being like, oh, well, a person went missing and it's not clear what the details of this case are, as opposed to X-hostage group, or X-kidnapping group, which is known to operate in these particular neighborhoods or has followings and supporters in these particular neighborhoods, did this at this particular time, and these are the demands that they have, then ultimately it's a lot easier to see the connections and easier for other individuals to be able to advance an agenda that ultimately helps the police lead to these captures. But now I'm going to move on to our third constructive point, because I think it ultimately demonstrates why this is not going to be effective. We think on our side of the house that these bans are always going to be circumvented, because there are fundamentally at least 4 parties that have fundamental incentives to do so, to violate this ban and to go against them. So the kidnappers themselves, first of all, recognize that they're trying to recruit individuals to their cause, that they're trying to terrorize the population. Then they're going to get sympathetic outlets like Iraqi television stations. Perhaps BBC is not going to be allowed to report on this. So there's always going to be fringe stations who are willing to report on this, or otherwise, individual bloggers, individual websites that are going to ultimately advance these sorts of agendas. They can put videos of themselves on YouTube, and ultimately this is very difficult to prevent. So even if they can't accomplish this sort of thing, then I think that they're often going to turn simply to murders outright, or bombings, or other terrible tactics like that, ultimately, in order to advance their agenda to either terrorize the population or gain publicity. So I don't think there's much for that. No. And I think furthermore, closing opposition gives you an example of Jalal Shalit. And side propositions answer this, and this gives me second example of the family, why the family will often report this to the media or otherwise publicize this. If the family believes it's beneficial to ultimately get the story out to the media, as it very often does in the Jalal Shalit case, then it doesn't matter what sort of cold logic or rationale that we approach this with. The families aren't necessarily going to use the same analysis that we use here, and they're not necessarily going to walk through exactly all the steps, even if you buy their logic, they don't have to be sure about why this is worse. I don't think the families themselves are going to approach it this way, and ultimately, the well-intentioned family members don't have the benefit of using this logic, and it's very likely that in cases like the Jalal Shalit example or other kidnappings, they're going ultimately to turn to the media for help and assistance in these cases. I also think that there are societal parties for whom security is a political issue that will politicize this issue and ultimately make it focus on the details, even when it's against the interest of other parties in society to do so. We think, for instance, opposition parties seeking to embarrass the political leadership in government. They, again, can use examples about how Catholic priests or a particular minority group is not having enough done by the government to protect them. For instance, Coptic Christians in Egypt. And I think that it's very easy to use that sort of rhetoric or to use those sorts of examples and let those details leak somehow, perhaps not doing it on the main opposition newspaper website, but somehow letting it get out to the blogosphere, through Twitter, through Facebook, advancing the notion that the government isn't doing enough to protect these particular minorities or these particular individuals for whom the specific details of their status matters. And I think it's really problematic. I think these sorts of individuals, or justice-minded bloggers, or individuals who simply think that that transparent government is a good thing are ultimately going to lead to the publication of these details anyways. For instance, groups like WikiLeaks or Anonymous ultimately think that the transparent government and one that is just very open in all regards is ultimately better. No thank you. I furthermore think that, the fourth example of a group that has insensitive to this, there's unscrupulous media outlets, right? Even if you have a wide ban, there are always going to be individuals who seek out the details of this case, who are willing to publish the details of this case, unless you're going to impose very severe penalties, in which case I think you are counterproductive. I think it ultimately diminishes the ability to actualize freedom of speech in these sorts of instances, and it's really problematic. You can't curtail this ultimately without shutting down social media, which is going to be seen as repressive and invites a very bad response. But furthermore, there's a filter effect, right? When major outlets with good reputations, no thank you. When there's a filter effect where major outlets with good reputations, like BBC, don't report on these or don't report on the details, then you get less factually accurate information from these fringe media outlets or more ideologically motivated reporting. No thank you. You get more ideologically biased and motivated as when the Iraqi television station is the one reporting the details and perhaps doesn't care whether it's getting the details wrong or portraying the details in a slanted manner to advance the aims of the ideologically motivated kidnapping group. I think balanced coverage is more likely to present victims sympathetically. And why is this important? As Sam tells you, we think it's really important to ultimately have a human interest, to have individuals be involved, which ultimately leads to more desire to punish kidnappers in society more harshly. It leads to more deterrence and less kidnappings in the future. And I think ultimately there's a strong reason to do this in order to deter future kidnappings. Because I think the ultimately on side proposition, they value the current emotional status of the victims and the victim's family at a degree that is much higher, that is disproportionate, and doesn't consider all the harms that will come to other individuals who are kidnapped, or the physical harm of the individual who is kidnapped. We think we're going to advance better with better information outside of the house. There's good ethical media out there, and I think that you should rely on balanced reporting. It's not necessarily the case that all of them are going to hound them. The BBC and CNN and these other organizations have some sort of ethical standards for how often they can approach this. They're not allowed to badger. Everyone's just bad in the industry. You should allow that legitimate media to look proud to oppose.
Thank you very much, Speaker. We'd now like to invite the Member of Government to come forward and extend counsels.
Ladies and gentlemen, we think that the primary concern of the debate is to ensure the safe return of the abducted. And we think that the presence of media coverage serves as a roadblock to this particular objective. And we think that closing government here will try to discuss the harms of excessive public scrutiny, which is concomitant to media coverage. And we're not really even concerned with how the media portrays these particular kidnappings or hostage crises, but the mere presence of excessive and unnecessary public scrutiny can in fact hinder the objective of bringing home these captives, or people who were held captive by their abductors. And we think that, especially in individual hostage crises, we think that these are extremely personal and intimate predicaments, and we think that the decisions made during the incident should only concern the families in conjunction with their cooperation with the governments and different state actors. And we think that public involvement should be completely absent in this particular instance. And we think that the presence of the ability of these families to make these untainted and calculated decisions is actually something that's quite crucial in this debate. But before that, before going to our extension, let me first rebut a few points from opening opposition. Because the first thing that they tell us is we want to preserve press freedom because it reflects on the government's performance. You can appraise how well the government is doing, right? Our first rebuttal to this is, number one, our policy does not preclude reporting after detention has subsided or has at least been resolved. And we think the outcome, which will be known to the public afterwards, can still be used to measure government performance. So we would think that the problem of press freedom in this particular instance is so grave at that. But second, we think that the delay in information or the delay in delivery of information is something that is acceptable. We think it's an acceptable trade-off because we think that public safety must take precedence over this immediate right to information that opening opposition is trying to forward in this debate. The next thing that they talk about is how this could serve as a means to engender civilian support in terms of trying to look for these hostages once information has been released to the public. Well, number one, we think that in these particular instances, especially talking about trained hostage takers and kidnappers, we think that, well, they are in a profession of hiding, right? So we don't think that generally it would be of huge benefit. There could be some miraculous instance that this could work, right? We think that the harms that come about with their policy do not outweigh the negligible benefits that maybe some civilian might be able to find these hostage takers at that. Right now, we're going to proceed to our primary extension. We're going to talk about how the media coverage actually increases the probability of failed and botched rescue operations. Because we think that when you have media coverage and excessive public scrutiny, we think that this creates an unnecessary pressure to act hastily. Right? And we think that when you talk about public knowledge, this implies two things. First, we think that it implies, number one, a heightened pressure from the public to actually resolve the situation, even through hasty and imprudent decisions. So we think that there's a heightened pressure to actually start resolving and taking action on the part of the public, and that's imposed on state actors. And second, we think that there's also an artificial form of appraisal and judgment from the public. Now, we think that all of these circumstances or these pressures might be beneficial, it might be good in other circumstances. We think that the idea of kidnapping is an extremely delicate scenario, and we think that the presence of these pressures during the kidnapping itself or during the process of rescue, right, we think is quite untimely and we think is not appropriate in that particular context. Because we think that this actually increases the likelihood of police error, especially when they know that the public is watching them, especially when they know that the public has increased or heightened pressure that they actually create that create immediate action in that particular instance. And that could actually affect, or that could actually lead to actually extreme scenarios, either maybe perhaps a premature assault, right? Or perhaps hesitant action from the police, given that they know that people are watching them, regardless of how they should act, or regardless of what their standard operating procedures indicate or obligate them to do. And the point is, we think that this excessive public scrutiny during the kidnapping scenario actually creates an incentive, right, to change the behavior of police forces or the behavior of operatives which would be different under conventional circumstances without the presence of public scrutiny. And we think that that could increase the dangers that these kidnappers pose to these people who are held captive. Before my second point, yes?
Won't awareness of public scrutiny make police more likely to use more resources and be very careful in their operations?
Yes, just as we,
under the public eye?
right, just as we said, in another context, perhaps public scrutiny would be a benefit. But we think that under a scenario that's extremely, that's characterized by tension, and a scenario that's characterized by decision-making that requires quick and swift action, right? We don't think that there's any room for police forces to account for what the media will portray them to be, or what the people or what the public might see them as, right? And we think that perhaps public scrutiny can come afterwards. We think that under this pressurized context, we think that this will in fact serve as a harm. Sorry, I'm not taking points. All right, for my second argument, we're going to talk about how this actually distorts the capacity of important stakeholders to make crucial executive decisions. And these situations obviously are considered with important choices. The choice of whether or not to pay that ransom, or the choice of the extent of negotiations, or even the choice of actually engaging in assaults or rescue operations. And we think that these choices are done either by families in conjunction with state actors. And we think that concomitant to media coverage is in fact public involvement. And we think that the intrusion of public opinion, either through pundits criticizing the decisions made by governments and families, or perhaps the dominant discourse that exists as a result of media coverage. We think this actually affects the family's decision-making, either for the fear of the consequences or perhaps paying a ransom in a society that begrudges enriching these terrorists or enriching these hostage takers. Or perhaps government officials whose reputations are at stake, especially when talking about the decisions that they're making. And we think that the decisions that are to be made by these government officials, right, should not be clouded by the presence of public scrutiny. And we don't think it should be clouded by how people will think of them afterwards or how people will actually judge them. We think that there are objective state interests that can be taken into account, and we think that the presence of media coverage only deviates away from this objective. Okay, so what do we talk about today? First, we talk about why public scrutiny, excessive public scrutiny, can be harmful, both for the operations, rescue operations, and both for strategic executive decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Speaker. We now invite the Member of Opposition to the podium.
The incredible assumption from the government in this debate has been that we're mainly talking about situations where kidnappers want money, where what happens is we best deal with these quietly. The families would rather nobody know, and good grief, the kidnappers would rather nobody know, and hopefully the media would just black out and are all in well. But that's not how kidnapping is in a lot of parts of the world. That's not how Abu Sayyaf operates in the Philippines. That's not how Al-Qaeda in Iraq operates. Politically motivated kidnappings are, by definition, publicity seeking. And when you deny them that publicity, it changes the dynamic in a way which we assert is very damaging for the hostages and makes them much less likely to survive. But let's start with some of their case. They said it's really bad because police are going to be under a lot of pressure. They have to make snap decisions because they worry about how the public will perceive them. And so too elected officials. They won't make the objective decision about the right way to deal with a kidnapping, whatever the objective decision is. To which we say, elections happen rather rarely. Police officials get appointed on quite long cycles. We imagine that when you're assessing who to elect, the situation will be over, and the public will remember whether it ended well or it ended badly, whether it ended with the hostages' safe return or their brutal slaughter. And we imagine that the politically expedient thing will coincide very much with the morally good thing, which is namely to maximize the hostages' chance of safe return. We just don't buy that an elected politician is so worried that there will be a vote of no confidence in the middle of a 2-week hostage situation that he'll botch the operation by ordering it too soon and having a pile of dead bodies on his hands. That's not the way democracy works. But then we heard from the opening government team that this is really bad because, hostage takers will know that the police know when the media reports it, and that's going to make it really dangerous because they don't want that and they might act really irrationally and in unpredictable ways, to which we say, quite often they go to the media. Quite often when Al-Qaeda in Iraq takes hostages, they go to the media. When Abu Sayyaf takes hostages, they go to the media because they want their political message to be made public. No. So, quite often we think they want the police to know, or at least they know the police will know. But more than that, a lot of these kidnappings are not premeditated in the way all of their analysis supposes. Because their analysis presupposes, right, that what's happening here is there will be some sort of rational cost-benefit analysis before the kidnapping. But what happens very often is that kidnapping is opportunistic, right? Abu Sayyaf happens upon a busload of tourists and decides he can take them hostage. A bunch of Palestinian militants happen upon an Israeli corporal by the name of Gilad Shalit, and they decide he's worth more to them alive than dead. They're worth more alive than dead because of the publicity they bring, which gives them negotiating leverage. In a world where that publicity doesn't exist, they're not worth that much alive anymore. If there was no media publicity from the capture of Gilad Shalit would have been shot on the spot. That's not a positive outcome for the hostage. Yeah.
Why, if certain organizations kidnap people for the publicity and we don't allow the publicity, would they still kidnap people?
Oh, yes, because that's the other thing in your case. You're not going to allow the publicity until after the hostage situation has concluded. But you've forgotten that hostage situations can conclude in 2 ways. They can be returned safely, or they can die. It's quite dangerous to return a hostage safely. So we imagine that if Al-Qaeda in Iraq has taken a hostage and wants media attention, under your policy, the most expedient thing for them to do is to kill them now, rather than seek to find a way to return them without being captured. So your policy is going to massively increase the likelihood that hostage situations for publicity instead become terrorist acts like bombings and shootings for publicity. That's obviously bad for the people who would otherwise be hostages. But onwards to the case. No. Our claim furthermore is that in many of these circumstances, hostage-taking is in fact a legitimate form of political action that deserves media attention. And why is that so? It is quintessentially the action of the powerless against the powerful. In many cases, it forces quite powerful state actors to confront their own hypocrisy. They want to talk about statistics, but we think it matters when there is a human face. When the Israeli people is forced to decide exactly how many Palestinian prisoners one 20-year-old corporal's life is worth. Because in exactly those situations, they become cognizant of the trade-offs that they implicitly make all the time. The trade-offs that they make all the time with the statistics that this side are so fond of and this side wants political decisions to be made on the basis of. When they have to say, look, this actual Israeli man, we thought he was worth the release of 500 Palestinian prisoners. Good grief, what are we doing? We think that's a massively politically beneficial move. In many cases, it's a very important counterpower that allows very oppressed people who are denied access to state media or corporate media, or who are denied any kind of proper linguistic access to the mainstream discourse, to be able to confront safe people, the safe majority that oppresses them quietly from their couches and sofas, no thank you, and say, this is what it's like to live your life on the edge. This is what it's like to live in Mindanao. This is what it's like to have your people face the utter lack of state protection that those people have faced, that came with illegal annexation, military pacification, forced migration, all of these things. They come to see what it's like to have arbitrary force and violence wielded against them, no thank you, at a time not of their knowing or of their choosing. And it is precisely this which makes a human face important, because that makes it alive to them. That makes it more than a statistic. And it means that there is a real Kantian consistency here. It forces the oppressive majority, no thank you, to become conscious of the hostage situation that very often minorities in lots of countries face all the time. The kinds of arbitrary abuse of power that they face all the time. The exact sense in which, say, the 2008 Filipino Supreme Court decision that the peace accord in Mindanao was not constitutional and struck that down. Exactly that kind of arbitrary exercise of state power and arbitrary exercise of violence becomes subverted by the act of hostage-taking, which takes the violence that the state otherwise wields, challenges that monopoly of violence, and instead turns it against them. And we put to you that this is massively important. It makes it tangible to every citizen what the stakes are. It converts a majority which otherwise can make decisions about who is forced to migrate from the safety of their seats, from the safety of their homes, and makes them aware that they are part of a conflict which their policy would deny a human face, a conflict which their policy would make sure people were very much unaware of. And yeah, we may have a few statistics here and there, but nothing that actually brought home what the dangers of this conflict was. We put to you that the act of hostage-taking is in many places with massively oppressed minorities, like in Mindanao, like in Iraq, an act of political resistance against a society that will not listen in any other way. And this act is an act which has a right to be heard and a right to be made known. It is wrong to suppress it. We beg to oppose.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Now I invite the government whip to take the stage.
Hello, citizens of the world. This is the closest I'm getting to a world final, so let's start. Where will terrorists most likely kidnap people? I think that this is a direct address to the previous speakers, very, very long-winded extension about, the whole oppressed majority, oppressed minority, all of that stuff will fall under that issue. But I would like to point out before I enter this issue, the very fact that it's a bit funny that he was talking about coverage of an oppressed minority, about how it's like to be forcibly migrated, to be to have pacification within your villages, and all of these suffering when we're not banning coverage of those ideas in the first place. What we're banning is coverage of the kidnapping and the atrocities that those people commit against others. What we mean by this, therefore, is that the whole notion that it's a good idea to talk about how governments can be oppressive falls on either side of this debate. Because we can do that on our own. We can, in fact, talk about how bad it is in Mindanao, how bad it is in Iraq for these individuals without necessarily having to violate the policy we're talking about. And I think that shows you that their argument to begin with does not have much value in this debate. But let's get on to the other aspects of his argumentation. He talked to us within this issue that politically motivated groups kidnap only for the sake of publicity, right? They kidnap because they want to come out in the newspapers and on television, right, and get their cause out there. But the fact of the matter is that that's not always entirely true. If you look at how Al Qaeda operates or how the Abu Sayyaf operates, a lot of them enter into kidnapping not because of political aims, but for the sake of funding their own terrorist cells, or in order to recruit more individuals, or in order to get funding. Right? That's why they always ask for a ransom instead of just posting a snuff movie about how they killed off this official. They always want that money. And what we say to you, therefore, is that these politically motivated groups aren't entirely politically motivated to begin with. And as such, the presence or absence of publicity is not the reason why they kidnap people. And as such, if we were in fact to stop them from, getting coverage, what is more likely to happen is not for them to start killing these people off, but for them to continue kidnapping them and try to operate a ransom demand elsewhere, or perhaps to just ignore them and to keep their secret headquarters safe, etc., etc. Now, as well as that, we say to you that the whole idea of using kidnapping as a means of awakening the consciousness within an oppressive majority is a bad idea to begin with. We tell you that the acts of violence, such as kidnapping, right, are things that engender hate and misunderstanding within these populations. We're talking to you about how the MNLF in the Philippines, for example, only was able to gain any political grounding when they laid down their arms. Same thing with the IRA in Ireland. The fact is that these violent actions don't motivate an awakening of a consciousness, it motivates a prolonged amount of war. And we think that type of discourse isn't necessarily good unless it goes into an area beyond violence. And that is something that we can provide for you when we talk about those issues outside of kidnapping. Now, is there a point of information?
Yeah. So when they laid down their arms in 2008, the Filipino Supreme Court ruled that the peace treaty was invalid. How are they succeeding?
No. In 2008, we're talking about the MILF, which didn't really put down their arms. The MILF was a group that put down their arms decades ago, and the MILF is a splinter cell group coming from that group. Okay? Yes, if I remember by Filipino history, I think that the outfit shows that I do. Okay. So, second issue. On the open conversation, will we still have the necessary information to make good decisions? Right? Now, I want you to remember that within this area of the debate, we are not withholding any personal information. We're only delaying the release of these things, right? In order for the appraisal to not come at a later time, as opening government talked about. We also say that the general information is still possible to be released. We're talking about saying that Mindanao is unsafe, Iraq is unsafe. We're not banning the government from releasing a statement from that. We think it would be ridiculous for the government to tell people to start heading in there and getting themselves kidnapped or killed. We think public announcements are fine and dandy in terms of providing that type of information. But honestly, our other rebuttal here is how important is it to know that this person who was kidnapped was engaged to a beautiful woman, had a dog that recently died because he was kidnapped or something like that. We think that the purpose of those things is not to inform the public, but to create a connection that increases the amount of media fanfare around that kidnapping, a connection that makes people more rabid in terms of whatever radical type of support towards whatever action they want to happen within those areas. And we think that even if this media were ethical, they are still profit motivated. And that fanfare is something that they always want to generate, and it is that fanfare that we say is bad. And that was the extension coming from Kurt, and that leads me to my third issue. Can good decisions be made within this area of media fanfare? We say that the public is unable to move past the emotional connections that open opposition is generating between these people. Because what happens when those emotional connections are made is that these people end up taking stands on what they want the government or the police to do. They pressure their public officials, well, not just during elections, but also their councillors, which happen every year, the commissioners of the police who get appointed, and all those individuals who are involved in the investigation to do things that may not be wise at the time. We're talking about situations such as the refusal of weighing the possibility of ransom. If the public sentiment at the time, for example, is that ransoming and funding terrorist cells is a bad idea, then no matter how reasonable the ransom is to save that person's life, the government will never enter into that act. Or, for example, if there's a high pressure upon the government to actually try to save that person, even though the possibility of a successful raid is extremely unlikely, it's very possible for them to go ahead and do that so that they can portray the image that they are at least trying to save that person. We think that those situations show you that the government, when public sentiment is dominant, tends to make bad decisions. And this has happened in numerous situations with the Abu Sayyaf. We're talking about situations like the bird hunts were kidnapped by the Abu Sayyaf when one of the hostages died in an ill-planned raid. We say as well that this extends beyond just decision-making and into operations as well. We say that despite the resource increase that we heard, right, it's not about resources, it's about how they use that resource. And we think that these police officers are not trained to go under all this media fanfare and all this media scrutiny, especially when the media is present in that area. We think that it means that it's more likely for the officers and the SWAT teams to make mistakes, like misfiring or hesitating. We think that that situation is a bad situation for everyone. We're very proud of the propose.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to invite the opposition whip to close this debate for us.
Ladies and gentlemen, the critical thing in this debate is about whether or not hostage-taking is a legitimate form of political expression. And that's the extension that we brought to you at closing opposition. And in considering that throughout the debate, I want to look at three questions that help us understand the flow. The first is, how do we preserve the welfare of individuals in hostage-taking situations? Secondly, how do we stop conflicts in the long term? And thirdly, how should we make moral choices about how to negotiate with hostage-takers? So firstly, let's talk about how we preserve the welfare of individuals. What we heard from opening government is that the real problem here is not about the time that they spend as hostages. The real problem is about when they come home and the exposure to the paparazzi between day one on return and 6 months later when all the details are resolved. That's a pretty narrow window of benefit to stake your entire case on. We think it's flawed for a couple of reasons. First of which is they're forcing a choice on people. Many victims actually heal and deal with trauma better by being able to tell their story to the public in a way that they've ruled out. But secondly, we think it's ridiculous for them to prioritise that over ending hostage situations in ways that prioritise to preserve the lives of those individuals. And so that's the second part of this response, getting people out alive. What we told you across the bench is that publicity creates value in keeping hostages alive. There are many cases where hostage-taking is deliberate, but there are many others when it's opportunistic, as we talked about in the case of Gilad and others. And in those cases, we want people to be taken alive, not killed. Because as long as someone is alive as a hostage, we have a chance of getting them back. And the only way that we can ensure that terrorist organisations will keep people alive is if they feel that people have real value to the organisation. When you shut down press coverage, you destroy the value of an individual as a political tool. You destroy the value of that hostage as being a powerful political tool, one that is more powerful than just killing them in the first place. We think it doesn't take a lot to stop people, terrorist organisations, from wanting to do that. Because holding a hostage is difficult. Holding a hostage is dangerous. And if you can just kill that person and make the problem go away, then your life is a lot better. And in fact, what we heard from opening government and what ZHENG BO told you is a policy that perversely encourages terrorist organisations to just kill people instead of taking them hostage. Because that's the only way that they can get the political coverage that they want and the political coverage that they actually need. Now then at closing we heard, this press coverage is going to pressure people into making hasty and impudent decisions. and police will be nervous because the public are watching them. We think SWAT forces are trained to deal with high-pressure situations. We guarantee you that the pressure of actually going in to relieve someone from a hostage situation is just a little bit more stressful than facing up to the press when they get home afterwards. We think, in fact, what pressure we will get is pressure to pursue a successful resolution to this, and not to just let the hostage situation disappear in a way that's more convenient for the government. And then what we heard, again, on this thing about getting people out alive, is that, well, we don't want the terrorist group to become, I'll take a second on this, Anna, we don't want the terrorist group to get paranoid that the police are onto it. And we point out if you want the police involved, which they probably know that that's going to happen, that's a good thing, and they conceded that. And then they said, oh no, but there's an illusion, a fiction, that we can all just pretend that we believe that the police aren't going to be involved. Well, we point back to then, the vast majority of cases, how do we know that a hostage has been taken? How does that get to the press? It happens because the terrorist group has publicised it, precisely for their goals and precisely for their goals. This is what the terrorists want.
So are you literally saying that we should prioritise the safety of hostages in all other cases, while also saying that it's a legitimate political tool that can be used and groups can actually actively seek to find hostages and capture them, and that's legitimate, even though they might be killed in the process?
So we're saying, just like war, ultimately hostage taking is a legitimate form of expression against an oppressive majority, and it's something that happens in an asymmetric scenario, whereas open warfare happens when you have even powers. But yes, it is legitimate. Now, at the same time, we're not inhuman, immoral, callous bastards. We'd like to see people come out of this alive, right? So in many ways, we actually think this is a better tool of policy than terrorist acts that kill people straight out. So the second thing I want to talk about is how do we stop hostage taking and stop conflicts. What we heard in opening was, well, one of the big problems here is copycat crimes, when people read about it and then they want to do it too. Well, stopping reporting in the press doesn't really stop that. It's called the internet. It's called a John Grisham thriller or a novel that tells you in far more detail how to capture someone and get away with it than any press coverage ever would. But more than that, that's not what this is about. This is about ending conflict. And what we heard from our opening is that you need public discourse on this to be able to have that. And we support them 100% in driving that through. But what we brought to extension is that this is a legitimate tool to stop conflict. You need to have a way to confront oppressors with the visceral nature of what they're doing. To quote Steve Hine, you need to make it visceral. You need to make it real for people. And kidnapping does that. And we heard in response from our closing government, well, no. The only way that you can ever have productive discourse, I think, Anna, is to have, lay down your arms. And he got all, antsy about my Filipino history. What I'd point out is that the memorandum of about ancestral domain, which was cut down in 2008, was about autonomy for all of Mindanao, for the MNLF and the MILF, and all people who live within Mindanao. And that wasn't coming about, and it hasn't come about in this manner.
If the only way to get attention from my supposed suppression is to fly a plane into the Empire State Building, is that also acceptable to you, and why? Yeah,
so as we pointed out earlier, one great moral distinction that we believe is important is not deliberately trying to kill people. Okay? So hostage taking actually in an awful situation is better than that. But secondly, we're happy to say that when people are being oppressed viciously by historical oppression and military oppression that happened throughout Filipino government regimes and by the Spanish and the Americans before that, then there is a time at which the only way that a group can prevent the oppression of their peoples, the destruction of their identity and culture, and the deaths that have been plagued upon them, the only way to do that is to take violent action on their own behalf. Sometimes that has to be done. And so the third and final argument, something that I want to introduce into this debate, is the idea about how and why a moral decision on a trade-off should be made. We think that hostage-taking is clearly a case where the public interest is being affected. We think in the case, for example, of Gilad Shalit, where he was traded for hundreds of Palestinian militants. Ultimately, we think this is a public policy question, and one that the public needs to have the ability to decide whether those trade-offs are worthwhile or otherwise. In exactly the same way that the public should know about the progress of a war and be able to vote in politicians or out on the handling of that, we think they should understand the trade-off in a political situation. And this is not something that we leave to technocratic bureaucrats, because ultimately weighing up a trade-off of lives and conflict is a moral decision that people should be involved. At the end of this debate, whether or not you think this is right hinges on whether hostage-taking is a legitimate form of expression. We believe it is. Thank you.
Thank Victor and thank all the speakers. We can ask one more round of applause for our speakers and give permission to retire. That said, I'd like to invite you all to begin first page of your adjudication form. Double check your serial number is on it. And the time you have starts now. We'll try and put a timer